It went live. Well, hey everybody, I'm Zach. It's been a while since I've gotten on here, but I wanted to start producing content again, so I've been taking some notes on a bunch of different topics. And I set up the thing to see what a live would look like just now, and I did not mean to make it start going, but it started, so gonna roll with it for a second and see if I can get it set up and if my connection is good enough, and if it is, we will do this video that I under the title that I had written on there about, which is Strongholds and Spiritual Authority as it relates to the human experience, and we're going to attempt to put it into psychological terms usable for the modern mind, and hopefully make these ideas tangible and tangible in a way that will be beneficial for your experience. But yeah, let me get this set up. Safe there. Cool. All right, so I'm gonna start off with a prayer. Thank you, God. Thank you for giving me the breath to be here and giving me the inspiration to stumble in front of the camera right now and to develop these notes. I ask that you please watch over me and you help to guide my words and guide my expressions in a manner that will be beneficial for the people and beneficial for me. And I ask you please watch over me and help me to grow through this experience in a way that will be healing and humbling and honoring of your truth and your love above my own confusions and things. Amen. So that being said, let's discuss the concept of spiritual authorities and strongholds as it pertains to our human experience. So we're going to ask a bunch of questions. We're going to kind of unpack the metaphysical model of what a spirit is, and I'm going to try to not unpack everything so much that it gets too dense, and I don't have notes on everything to unpack at all in an extremely in-depth fashion either. So let me just start going, and we'll see how it unfolds. So we're gonna talk about the idea of potential, okay? Because sorry, I've got a marker over my hands. We're gonna talk about the idea of potential because it's necessary, I think, to meditate on the idea of potential as it relates to spirit and the idea of spirits, or like spiritual underpinnings relating to our human experience, like the biblical idea of spirits, let's say. So to help make these ineffable ideas more tangible, let's consider how spirits pertain to potential, okay? So in the human experience, we have the potential for good and the potential for bad. We have the potential for love and the potential for destruction, the potential for life, the potential for death, etc. Our human experience is always navigating a field of potential. We can argue over what we qualify as good or bad or whatever, but regardless, we're navigating a field of potential inherently in our experience. And that field of potential is not generic and neutral all the way across it. There's a geography to it, whether you want to call it good or bad or, whatever is another point. But there's a geography, and we navigate the field of potential. So likewise, we can map our experience in life down to smaller crossroads in the field of potential where we're making choices and having smaller inclinations. Like you could say on a big level, there's the inclination for, oh, sorry, hold on, I skipped. Potential for good and bad. On a larger level, we have the potential for goodness and the potential for adversity, like potential for life, potential for death, like these like broader categories, you know? But there's like, we could consider these like primary crossroads where we have crossroads between choosing good, choosing evil, choosing destructive things, choosing blessing, beneficial things, you know? There's these broad crossroads, but likewise we can map our experience down into these smaller crossroads of choice and these a smaller field of inclination and a more fine field of potential that we are navigating in any given moment. And the way this smaller field and these smaller crossroads would look like would be the inclinations of pride, inclinations of lust, of greed, of patience, of forgiveness, of humility. And so when you start to think of it like this, inclinations and potential, it starts to, when you use these terms, specifically when we're looking at pride and lust and things like that, it starts to become more apparent how the concept of spirits pertains to this, in my opinion. Because, you know, biblical ideas, you know, the Bible lists like a handful of like specific spirits, like a spirit of lust, spirit of iniquity, and like, you know, spirit of like infirmity, like sickness and stuff, you know. It's like, but they're kind of like broad, like I think and that's intentional. I think is broad, and it's describing categories, and it's pointing to like essentially the way the field of potential is shaped, right? So the field of potential naturally has avenues for greed, for lust, for patience, for love, right? So when you zoom out on a broader level, the field of potential has avenues pointing towards love and goodness and God and things like that, and then towards destruction and not good things, right? And again, like I said earlier, we can argue over the distinctions of what qualifies as good and bad or whatever, or what exactly is God and all that. But just for the sake of this video, I'm trying to just really make tangible the concepts of spirits and spiritual authorities and what it is to have a stronghold. Because if you're someone who feels like you differ with the idea of spirits, or the idea that there could be something like mystical happening that has any control over you, this video is specifically designed for you and that sort of disposition. Not to attack it, but to try to pitch this concept in a way that will be reasonable and usable, because I consider myself pretty logical and scrutinizing generally. I'm just, I see a lot of value in function in these metaphysical and spiritual models, especially the biblical ones. But my experience prior to studying biblical metaphysics was personal, mystical, shamanistic kind of stuff for 10 years, and as well as studying Eastern philosophies and different things. So it's not like limited. This concept is not limited to just biblical study or pursuit. But I do think that when we unpack this fully, and this kind of model, this language that I'm trying to organize pertaining to the biblical model can help us to have a more cohesive view of it with our modern minds and our psychological disposition that we all come from, and this like hyper-rational perspective that we all come from. So anyways, so what we think of as spiritual authorities and strongholds in these terms, considering our day-to-day experience of having inclinations and desires and making choices, the Bible model of metaphysics starts to become more tangible to our modern psychological disposition, hopefully. So that's pretty much what I just said. But little tiny diagram here, we got our heart right here. We've got our feelings, and there's crossroads. Our heart can go this way, our heart can go that way. I'm just put like loose terms on here, but life, love, God, this is the field of death, and Hasatan, which in metaphysical terms is kind of like the root archetype pertaining to Satan, and that's a whole nother mystical topic we can unpack. But my point is here is that we have a crossroad between things like wisdom, peace, kindness, and truth, lust, greed, selfishness, deceit, and it's not always that black and white. At times, you can have an avenue that crosses over and, you wind up doing good things going down one of those roads. It's not intended to be quite that black and white, but it is black and white in the sense that I think that there are decisions that are more harmonic and less harmonic. Harmonious is a good word, I think, too, in a lot of cases. Like, I think what God's design is for us to work in an equilibrium with the design of everything else going on. And when we walk out of that harmony, there's a certain destruction and an entropy, and that's that kind of field of death in metaphysical, mystical terms. So, yeah. So in the Bible, when it talks about like choosing life, something in the Old Testament, I don't know the quote off the top of my head, but like choose. I set before you, life and death, and like God wants us to choose life, but in general, it's suggesting like this field of potential is open before us. Like, we can choose life, we can choose death. Like, we have access to walking through a field of potential with specific effects and ramifications. That sounds like a harsh term, but in general, we want our choices to have an effect in objective reality, don't we? Do you want your choices to just be a delusion and they were just a dream and they weren't real choices? No, you want your choices to be real in some sense, and that's a real effect of our life. And I think that's where some of this spiritual stuff starts to become usable. I mean, our life experience inherently is pretty important, but in our terms here, we really are choosing life and choosing death. I don't want to unpack all the theological tangents. Hopefully I can get my content creation going again, and we can do that kind of stuff together in the coming weeks. But thank you guys for joining. I see a couple of people here. I appreciate the fellowship and a chance to share these ideas. So the second part here, I wrote down some questions that we can't answer as much as we would like to, but the point of the questions will point us towards the meditations on this topic that are actually usable, because we can talk about the ideas here for a minute, and hopefully we can do it effectively and have it be beneficial. But really, all these concepts, anything spiritual, it's all between you and God. It's in your own life that any of this stuff will either blossom into having meaning or not. So we're going to ask a couple of questions here that will hopefully be things that you can meditate on and think about. So here we are, seemingly sovereign beings in our lives, navigating this field of potential, and we have inclinations and aspirations, like all of us do. But it begs us thinking that we have inclinations and aspirations, begs the question, is it possible that these inclinations and these aspirations and these desires have us? Do we have authority over the desires and the inclinations, or are these desires and these inclinations holding authority over us? Okay, so that's our first question. Do we have the freedom to stand against our inclinations? Do we have the strength to, like right now, whatever you're inclined to do, like whether it's something good or something bad, do you have the strength to stand against it? Like, are you capable of navigating the field of potential and choosing sovereignly to actually not do that thing? We can think of like addiction as a really very quick example of where our sovereignty can fall short, and it's something that is seemingly accessible, but then we can get addiction's an extreme. You can draw it back a lot more though too, and think of things that are seemingly more benign, like lust and pride and all these things, right? Like, it's easy to say, well, it's okay, I think it's all right to be lustful or prideful. I'm not here to challenge what's the level of whatever is right. That's not the point of this. The point is like, whatever your lust or your pride or whatever is, do you actually have the ability to challenge it? Like, are you able to stand above that if you wanted to? Or do you have the authority to do that? Or is that pride always going to be above you? Like, is it always going to linger above you? And are you unable to not be prideful and stand above that potential and actually navigate and express yourself outside of that field of probability, if you will? So coming back into spirit terms, right? So what breath do you breathe, like, in every given moment? What breath are you breathing in? What is the source of your ambition, and what is your fuel? What is your God? Who is your God, right? All these questions are meant to be like kind of a packet. Those ones are like, in the Bible, the term breath and spirit are the same thing. It's ruach in Hebrew. I'm probably not pronouncing that very well, but those terms are like interlocked for a reason, because there's an inherent connection between the two ideas, that what is of the spirit is of the breath, right? Like God's breath is God's spirit. I think it. Don't quote me on everything. Like, I actually do quote me, and by all means help me and correct me and help to refine my theology and my perspective, because I'm open to being challenged in a friendly way. But anyways, so if we consider the idea that we're breathing things in, right? We're breathing, and then we use that breath to walk towards whatever our aspiration is. Our breath is our fuel. We breathe in, and then we walk towards something, right? So we breathe in spirit, and we move towards the destination that it fuels us towards, right? So this is the model that I'm kind of presenting. And I think this is generally what the Bible suggests too, when you look at the metaphysical underpinning of what it's kind of drawing with the idea of spirits, and there being like spirits of like lust and spirits of greed and stuff like that. So we breathe in oxygen and we walk down the street in physical terms, right? So let's picture we breathe in lust. If what we're breathing in is the potential for lust, that's the spirit that captivates us, then what we're going to do is we're going to walk down the street to fulfill that satisfaction. And there's like a momentum there, right? Because it's like, once you're drawing in that lust, like the inclination that you feel to satisfy or do whatever with that becomes strong. It has like a gravity to it, right? So if you breathe in love, you're breathing in a loving spirit. You're starting from a loving place. If that is where your breath is originating, then that breath sprouts the inclination to walk towards something loving, right? And we're all a mixed bag, right? I mean, we have like various different things going on, so it's not always that simple. But I think that this is a big part of what the Bible model is suggesting too, though. Like the idea of the Holy Spirit is like, you know, didn't mean to go down that avenue, but it's like the Holy Spirit is the root word is kodesh for holy, and it means set apart. So if you think of like, there's all these different potentials, there's like all these ambitions and inclinations and all these things that we have all in front of us all the time. The concept of reaching for a kodesh breath inherently suggests that we're reaching for something that is set apart from this wide field of all the things that we're interacting with. Okay, so like we could breathe in love, we could breathe in hate, we could breathe in lust, we could breathe in greed. It's like we're on a fundamental level, our spirit vessel is like interacting with all these different spirits. And in my opinion, we don't really have to model the spirits as being like personalities or any sort of like entity for the sake of this. Like there might be value for that in unpacking it further in ways, but I think when we consider the idea of spirits as sort of being like interchangeable with being like almost like energy or something, and I don't mean to make it like too new agey, because some of that can be like distracting, I think, but there's value, I think, in that idea with this, because we don't really quite know the objective nature of what a spirit is. So if we're able to kind of think of it in more like loose terms and model it more loosely, we might be able to wind up with something a little bit more usable through our whole course of meditation. So when we breathe in love, we go and we walk out and we bless someone, right? So we're always breathing things in, and we're always having expressions. We're always feeling inclinations, and we're always going and carrying out actions. Somebody's all like high on greed, breathing in greed. That's the breath you're breathing in. That's the spirit you're associating with. That's what you carry out. So I don't want to unpack this further. Let's keep going. But there's like a gravity to that. You see what I'm saying? Like the more that you breathe in the spirit of that greed, the more that you're associating with that, the more that there's a gravity that pushes you towards that destination, or a given destination associated with that spirit. So the question is like, are we really deciding that at a certain point, or is that momentum like kind of deciding for us? Is that path already carved? And in the model or the metaphor of like an addict comes back into view with this. Like, are we really like making the decision, or are we is our decision a byproduct of a momentum that already occurred before this moment? you know? And I think on the human experience, like, we all have to be humble enough to actually assess that, like, we are kind of a byproduct of previous momentums in our own foolishness and previous momentums in the world's foolishness and societal conditioning and crazy stuff, you know? And like, when we kind of take a second to stop that, some of those like runaway trains lose their momentum, at least a little bit. So, what breath do you breathe? What source your ambition, your fuel? So, next couple of questions. Why do you? We're almost done too. This isn't incredibly long, so I appreciate anybody watching. Why do you do what you do? Do you choose which inclinations you hold? Like right now, like what you're inclined to do, like what you desire. Did you choose that, or not? Can you change the desires and inclinations that you have if you want? If you tried really hard, could you do it? You know, and like I said, this whole section is questions that we don't have good answers to. So it's okay if you don't have good answers to this. I don't have as good of answers to this as I would like. Can you change the inclinations if you want? Do a Q&A? Oh, awesome. Yeah, I would love to do a Q&A. Thank you for joining and commenting. I very much appreciate it. I'm almost done too. Do you choose which inclinations you hold? Can you change those inclinations if you want? And most importantly, for the discussion of strongholds and principalities and this stuff, can you resist the momentum of those inclinations if you try? Whatever that inclination is, the greed, the lust, whatever, can you resist it if you try? You know, we could ask the same question with good stuff. Can you resist patience if you try? But you find it's actually a lot easier to resist patience if you want. If you have a virtue and you choose to say, oh, can I resist it? Yeah, you probably can. But some of these negative inclinations, they're actually very difficult to resist. And that's the kind of profound part about meditating on some of this stuff is it's humbling, you know, and it's not just biblical stuff. Any spiritual worldview, you know, if you really start trying to assess yourself and if you're really trying to take the quest seriously of asking yourself the question of what your purpose is and what you're here to do and what you're capable of and what true harmony is and what God's purpose is and all of that, if you're really trying to ask those kinds of questions, yeah, you have to you have to be willing to consider resisting some of the momentums that you already have in place, because some of those are likely out of line with whatever the highest purpose is. Like, we're all kind of imperfect by default. So last couple of questions. Do you do what you do just because you feel like it? Is that kind of your mentality? Is like, oh, I just do what I do because I feel like doing it. This is what I feel like doing. Don't tell me what to do. I do what I do. Right? Like, we all kind of have a part of ourselves that says that, I think. But why do you feel that way? Like, why do you feel the way that you want to do? Why do you feel that way? And could you change that feeling if you did try? When your feelings are at their, and this is another question, when your feelings are at their very strongest, do they absolutely decide what you're going to do, right? So whatever your feeling is, like, let's say anger, you got a problem with anger. When that anger is at its highest point, does that anger decide what you're going to do? Does that anger turn into your mouth saying something that you really actually don't want to say, or doing something volatile or something that you really don't want to do? Like, you're in a conflict. You know, we have these dilemmas because we end up doing something or saying something that is not ideal. It's something we don't want. It was imperfect. And we have these like kind of like fractures in ourselves afterwards where we're like, that's not me. That's not who I am. That's not what I want, right? So it's like we're all kind of caught in this dilemma of these things, like having this momentum and this energy, you know? And yeah, like when excuse me, it's humbling to assess and ask ourselves, like, if we're actually if we've ever even tried to resist our inclinations and some of these things. Oh, I'll check the comments at the end here, because I'm not even sure how to do that on my phone right now. They keep disappearing. The parts of your experience, which include disharmonic stuff, like I was saying, like inclinations that are bad and destructive, and ones that you cannot readily take control over, like negative stuff in your life that you cannot take control over, that you're unable to stop the momentum of, those are the strongholds, right? So that's like kind of where I'm landing. Those are like the strongholds in your life. Those are the things in your mind. in your emotional experience that are bound. They're parts of the field of potential that are bound, and you're unable to walk through them as much as you could. You could walk through them more. Your navigation through the field of potential is hindered by whatever those things are. Those things are the strongholds and the spirits or whatever, right? But it doesn't have to be like a cartoon boogeyman hiding up in like a web of potential. You know what I mean? It could be like a knot in like the energy field or whatever. It doesn't really matter to me what exactly a spirit looks like. I mean, or if it doesn't look like anything, because it's like not material. That's not as important. They're like knots in the field of potential and barriers which contain your free navigation and intoxicate your decision making, to where when these knots are present in your field of potential, these strongholds are there, not only do they hinder your ability to navigate the field of potential, but they will intoxicate your mentality and intoxicate your decision making into convincing you to not even try to push against them and being complacent, right? To where like years go by and we never even challenge something that we knew we kind of wanted to challenge. It's intense. I mean, this is where the whole topic of like spiritual warfare and all this kind of stuff like unpacks from in very real terms. Is like, it's spooky, like it's real stuff, you know what I mean? Like the binding power of some of these things. But the good news is that God's binding power is way stronger, and it wants to actively work through all of us and like totally conquer all of the hellish evil stuff that's winding through the Babylon system. So let me go through my last little page here, the closing thoughts. None of us can answer these questions as entirely as we would like to, and none of us have fully tested the extent of our ability to conquer desires. And none of us can fully know the inclinations that are truly us, and which may be, or which may be a passing desire which has gained allure despite our pursuits being limited by the allure, right? So big statement, but none of us can fully discern exactly which inclinations of ours are like truly ours, or like, this is just me, this is just what I feel like, or what could actually be something that has hijacked a portion of our thoughts. Whether the spirit, it's like a spirit binding you as like this thing hovering over you and like sapping energy. Maybe it is that. Maybe it's like this energy field, like magnetic thing that's like bending your potential. Who knows? I think I kind of look at it different ways at different times based on like, my current mentality and stuff. Like, I'm just working with what I got. But yeah, I'll say that last statement again. None of us have fully tested the extent of our ability to conquer our desires. And also none of us can fully know what inclinations are ours, and which may be a passing desire which has gained allure, even though that allure causes our other pursuits to get distracted, right? So like, we all have things that might appear like a desire and an inclination, like things that we want, but they might not actually be things that we want, but they're things that have gained some kind of fascination along the trail and intoxicated us. Like, again, we fall back into like the addiction kind of metaphor again, where it's like, we get like addicted to these highs and these feelings of like pride and greed and these things, right? Principalities, or no, I'm not using that term on this one, strongholds, we get kind of like high on these different feelings, and they wind up kind of controlling us, the feeling of lust, these different things, and over time, like, we have to ask ourselves, do we have the feeling of lust, or does the feeling of lust have us? Do we have that pride, or does that pride have us? Do we actually even choose that anymore? Like, is that us, or is that like a spiritual authority, having a binding in our mind and our emotions? It's real stuff. It's like, I'm laughing, but it's also like, I don't know, it's spooky for me, for how real this stuff is, and no joke. So the biblical model of metaphysics and spiritual dynamics are intentionally left mysterious and on many and open and kind of like poetic. I think it's intentional because it's the engagement of the mystery which bears functional fruits for us, right? So like, this spiritual kind of stuff, everything I just went over, I don't think it's ever supposed to be fully tangible. Like, I'm trying my best to use words and sculpt it into something that like you can ponder and have fun with and think about. But this stuff, to really make it usable, it's between you and God. It's in your own meditations. Like, you're only ever gonna actually like any of this stuff, even if you didn't watch this video, all of this kind of spiritual stuff, like sorting out like your discernment of like your life and your purpose and all of this stuff, that's all in your own heart, your own mind, whatever. It's in your own meditations and in your own life. So a lot of the biblical mystical stuff is intentionally open like that because it's drawing you into the meditation. It's not going to give you everything laid out in technical terms so that you can sit back and be like, oh, I understand spiritual stuff now. It's like the open door. It leads, it will show you that trail that leads to the inner chamber where like the metaphorical Holy of Holies is, and like, we can walk into that temple inside of ourselves. The Christ calling is to walk into the inner temple and approach God directly in a real way, and not in like a fluffy, fun, new age way, but like actually really cutting through all the doubts and the questions of our life and actually walking to truth and to purpose in true meditation, you know? So anyways, I think the Bible left all this stuff kind of open and mystical because it wants to draw you in there. It doesn't want somebody else to go in there and write a book and tell you about it. It wants to draw you to go in there and meditate and to actually like go to the river and repent and all the stuff that's the hands-on stuff. Like, we have to ourselves actually approach, and if we want to make sense of any of this, and if we seek to truly live doing good and serving the highest calling of our being, we must always reassess if what we want to do is the ideal, or if there's an entirely different desire which is more ideal and we may not be currently understanding of. That question right there really connects to the idea of, are we worshiping a false idol or of our own creation, or are we truly worshiping God? Because regardless of your exact ideas or beliefs about God or your perspectives on the Bible or anything like that, that idea right there, false God versus real God, now that's a very functional thing to ponder on, because we all have, regardless of the nuances of what we can talk about, how exactly real God is and whose perspective of God was best in history and all of that, we can talk about the concept of a false idols, false creations, things that we make versus things that are real. And just that alone, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of potential to create a false God and create these idols and these things that we obsess over, and we will tell ourselves that that's God calling us into stuff when it so we're not thinking, when it might not necessarily be, So, and again, those are things we're meant to meditate on. I'm not here to tell you where the lines are and check your boxes or anything like that, but this whole concept is what is meditation in spirit and truth on God's purpose for our lives. And that's where I kind of want to land at with this whole thing is, we are navigating a field of potential in our lives. We're walking through, you can choose good, choose bad, choose life, choose death. There's a big range of things that we can do with our time. And it's important the way we spend our time. And we have the freedom to do a lot, and we can achieve amazing things. And we have to ask ourselves where we're limited and where we are accepting these bindings, and where we have spiritual authority held over us that is not in harmony and is not good, because it's not, you don't need to prove anything to me, some internet guy. You changing something in your life has, my view on it has nothing to do with anything, but you have so much potential and capability in your time and in your life, and you really can bless a whole lot of people around you, and all of us can. And to me, that's the bringing heaven to earth sort of thing. We have to be the light of the world and walk that out. In every second that we're caught up in our head doing something silly, because I'm not perfect. All this stuff, all these notes come from me reflecting on my foolishness and seeing like where I fall short, and trying to map this out and take it seriously, you know, because like I know that I don't have absolute sovereignty, but I do know that no matter how weak I am and how much I might fall short at times to these different things, these prides and these, right? Like the different things at times might have power over me, but I know that God has more power over them. And so that as long as I cling to God and I'm in my own meditations and in my own prayer, in my own life, as long as I'm walking and seeking to be in line with that, I know that even the most intense moment of that pride, if I cling entirely to God's authority is stronger than that, and I can actually stand against it. And in like, that's, I guess where I'll really land the video, in Christian mystical functional terms, that's that strength for the David to slingshot the Goliath, you know? It's like, it doesn't come from ourself having the strength to do it. Like yourself never has the strength to overcome an obstacle that's bigger than the self, right? But God has the ability to work through the self and overcome those obstacles, you know? And in the field of potential, like Matrix style, you know, it's like there's like a 0.01% chance that you could like do something crazy and like save the day, you know what I mean? But God operates from like this higher field of navigation. So it's like if you're actively seeking to be in line with like the highest order of GPS, you'll know where to slingshot that thing, you know? But when you're coming from selfishness and pride and all this kind of stuff, we're not operating from that same level, and you know what I mean? And then here we are, and we're like getting knocked around by the waves of pride and lust and all this silly stuff that we call our day-to-day life, you know? And it's a trip for me the last, you know, I haven't made videos in 5 years, but I've had a very profound firsthand mystical Christ experience, and I've had a lot of mystical experiences along the road, and people have seen my videos probably know that, but this is like, you know, it was world shattering. It was, you know, the Christ reborn kind of thing. It's cliche in so many ways, but at the same time, it has been custom tailored to my mystical mindset, and I'm trying to honor God with it, and also like be real and not just like fall into religious like silliness, but try to really just study this stuff and meditate on it and make sense of it. And doing the same thing I've been doing all along. I'm attempting to let God use me for whatever purpose, you know what I mean? And I'm always trying to understand what God is a little bit more and everything. You know, before my Christ experiences, I was trying to understand that. And after Christ experiences, still trying to understand the nuances of how all that works, you know? So, okay, I got the comments. Okay. It says, when you're upset, you're taking shallow breaths. Take deep breaths, try to respond. Okay, yeah. Hold on. I feel that. This is going through like so much of the time, so it's hard to see what it was connected to. The term source. Yeah. All the terms have different application, and I'm like a language. I do a lot of writing and stuff, so I'm all about language and having fun with it, you know. And theologically wise, you know, I use the word God because I think it's important to draw reverence to something that is like a thing and like has like a sentience to it, you know. Just in like mystical terms, regardless of beliefs. But I get it. You know, I mean, I talk with people that use the term like universe and stuff, and I don't like universe and God swapping. I know that's not what you suggested, but universe God swapping, I feel like is not theologically sound. But for sake of conversation, I love everybody. I'm here to just like talk and like respectfully like dialogue with everybody, you know. But yeah, source. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like I have no problem with using the term source. You know, like it's cool, you know. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, especially Nobody Kayaks, my friend who has watched through a good portion of this video. But everybody else who jumped in and out during it, I really appreciate the fellowship and you guys coming and watching. I'm going to try to put some more content out here. This was an experiment to get my gears rolling again and get my anxiety down enough to be able to comfortably like process my ideas through this, because it really takes like a mental acrobatics act for me to be able to like get on and do this, but it's really fun and nice when I get it rolling. So as long as you guys like this, if you want to leave some comments and subscribe and like the video and all that stuff, whatever you want to show me that you like the content, I would appreciate it. And any input you have and respectful criticism and challenges and all that, I'm here to hear it, and I look forward to growing and developing alongside you guys. So thank you. Have a good day.